Do you know the words bus, train, and ticket, but still don't know how to talk naturally about public transport in English?
Then this lesson is for you.
Our lessons are built to help you understand the topic more easily. First, we give you a real dialogue so you can hear the English naturally in context.
Then we come back and explain the most useful phrases step by step so the topic feels much clearer and easier to use.
And remember, you can switch the subtitles into your own language if that helps you follow the lesson more easily.
Now let's get into the conversation.
Hi, Daniel. Today's topic is really practical because almost everyone needs it at some point.
Hi, Eva. Yes, definitely. Public transport is one of those everyday topics that comes up all the time in real life, especially if you live in a city, travel often, or don't drive everywhere.
And it's also one of those topics where learners often know individual words, but not how to speak about it naturally.
Yes, they might know bus, train, station, or ticket, but they don't always know how to explain what usually happens, what they prefer, or what problems they've had.
That's very true. So let's start simple. Do you use public transport often?
It depends where I am and what I'm doing, but in general, yes, fairly often. If I'm in a big city, I usually use it much more because it's often easier than driving. In smaller places, though, it really depends on how good the transport system is.
That sounds very natural. So your answer is not just yes or no, it depends on the place.
Exactly. I think that's quite realistic. Public transport can be really convenient in some places and much less useful in others.
That makes a lot of sense. What kind of public transport do you use most often?
Probably buses and trains most often. Buses are useful for short everyday journeys, and trains are usually better for longer trips. I don't use the underground that often unless I'm in a large city where it's the easiest option.
That's very clear. Do you generally like using public transport?
I'd say I have mixed feelings about it. When it works well, I really like it because you don't have to worry about driving, parking, or traffic in the same way. But when it's delayed, overcrowded, or unreliable, it can become frustrating very quickly.
That's such a natural answer. So the feeling really depends on whether the system is working well that day.
That's right. A smooth journey can feel easy and practical, but one delay can change the whole mood.
That's very true. What do you usually care about most when using public transport?
Probably reliability first. I can accept that a bus or train takes a little time, but I want to feel reasonably sure it will actually arrive when it's supposed to. After that, I'd say comfort matters too, especially on longer journeys.
That makes complete sense. So being on time matters more than speed alone.
Yes, definitely. I think frequent transport is useful, but reliable transport is even better.
That's such a strong point. So if someone asked you, how often do you take the bus, what would you say?
I might say a few times a week. Not very often these days. Mostly when I'm in town. Quite often, actually. Only when I really need to.
Those are really useful, very simple, but very natural. What about trains? Do you enjoy traveling by train?
Usually, yes. I think trains can be one of the most comfortable ways to travel, especially if the journey isn't too crowded and you can sit down properly. I like the fact that you can read, look out the window, or just relax a little.
So for you, trains feel calmer than buses sometimes.
Often, yes. Buses can feel more practical for short local journeys, but trains often feel better for longer distances.
What are some common problems people have with public transport?
I'd say delays are one of the biggest problems. Then overcrowding, cancellations, long waiting times, and sometimes just poor connections between one service and another. Even if one part of the journey is fine, a bad connection can make the whole trip stressful.
That's such a useful sentence. A bad connection can make the whole trip stressful.
Yes, because that's often what happens. It's not always one dramatic problem. Sometimes it's just that the journey doesn't flow smoothly.
That's very true. So if your train is delayed, what might you say naturally?
Maybe the train's delayed again. It's running late. There's been a delay. I think I'm going to miss my connection. everything's running behind today.
Those are excellent and very real. What about if a train or bus is extremely full?
Then you might say, it was packed. It was really crowded. There was hardly any room. I had to stand the whole way. I couldn't even get a seat.
Yes, that's so useful. I think I had to stand the whole way is especially realistic.
Yes, definitely. That happens a lot on busy routes.
Do you usually prefer public transport or driving?
Again, it depends. In a large city, I'd usually prefer public transport because driving can be stressful and parking can be expensive or difficult. But in less connected areas, driving is often more practical and gives you much more freedom.
So your preference changes depending on the situation.
Exactly. I don't think one is always better than the other. It really depends on distance, location, cost, and how much time you have.
That's such a balanced answer. What about buying tickets? Do you think that's a useful area of English too?
Absolutely. People need phrases like, can I get a ticket to... Is this the right platform? What time's the next train? Is this bus going to the city center? Do I need to change anywhere? Those are very common and very useful.
Yes, definitely. And what if someone is lost or unsure?
Then they might say, excuse me, does this train stop at... Do you know if this bus goes to... Am I on the right platform? How long does the journey take? Where do I get off?
That's so practical. And those are exactly the kinds of phrases people need in real life, not just in lessons.
You're absolutely right. Public transport English is not about sounding impressive. It's about being clear enough to get where you need to go.
That's such a good summary. What about describing your general opinion of public transport?
You could say things like, it's convenient when it works well. It's not always reliable. It can be quite expensive. It's useful in busy cities. It saves me the stress of driving. It's fine for short journeys, but not ideal for long ones.
Those are very natural, and I think "it saves me the stress of driving" is a really strong phrase.
Yes, definitely. That's how a lot of people really feel.
So if I asked you now, what's your experience of public transport in general, what would you say?
I'd say it can be very useful, especially in places where it's frequent and reliable. I like it when it saves time and makes travel easier, but it can also be frustrating when there are delays, cancellations, or too many people. Overall, I think good public transport makes daily life much easier.
That sounds like such a natural answer. Clear, balanced, and very real.
Yes, because this topic is all about practical, everyday English.
Okay, now let's look at the key phrases from the dialogue and see how to talk about public transport in English more naturally.
Yes, because this topic is not only about transport vocabulary, it's also about habits, preferences, problems, and asking practical questions.
Let's start with talking about how often you use public transport. Useful phrases here are, I use it fairly often, a few times a week, not very often these days, mostly when I'm in town, only when I really need to. It depends where I am.
These are very useful because they help you sound natural straight away.
That's right. Then, if you want to talk about what kind of transport you use, these phrases are very helpful. I usually take the bus. I use trains more than buses. I don't use the underground very often. Buses are better for short journeys. Trains are more comfortable for longer trips.
These make it easy to talk about your normal habits.
Yes, and they're very natural in real conversation. Now let's talk about opinions, because people often want to say whether they like public transport or not. Useful phrases include, it's convenient when it works well, it's not always reliable, it can be quite expensive, it saves me the stress of driving, it's useful in busy cities, it's fine for short journeys but not ideal for long ones.
These are very realistic because they sound balanced.
They let you give an opinion without sounding too extreme. Another very important part of this topic is talking about problems. People often say things like, The train's delayed again. It's running late. There's been a delay. Everything's running behind today. I think I'm going to miss my connection. It was packed. It was really crowded. I had to stand the whole way. I couldn't even get a seat.
These are the kinds of phrases people really use when something goes wrong.
Yes, definitely. This is very real-life English. Now let's look at practical questions, because that's one of the most useful parts of this topic. If you need help while traveling, these questions are especially useful. Can I get a ticket to... What time's the next train? Is this the right platform? Is this bus going to the city center? Do I need to change anywhere? Excuse me, does this train stop at? Do you know if this bus goes to? How long does the journey take? Where do I get off?
These are excellent practical phrases.
Yes, and they can really help in a real travel situation. Another very natural part of this topic is comparison. People often compare public transport with driving, and these phrases are useful for that. In a big city, I prefer public transport. Driving is more practical in smaller places. It depends on distance and location. Parking can be difficult. Public transport gives you less freedom but less stress. Driving is easier in areas with poor connections.
These are really useful if you want to speak in a more balanced and natural way.
So, if we bring the most useful language together, here are some key phrases from today's lesson. I use it fairly often. It depends where I am. Buses are better for short journeys. Trains are more comfortable for longer trips. It's convenient when it works well. It's not always reliable. The train's delayed again. It was packed. I had to stand the whole way. Can I get a ticket to? Is this the right platform? Do I need to change anywhere? Where do I get off? It saves me the stress of driving. Good public transport makes daily life much easier.
That's a really strong set of phrases.
Yes, and all of them are very useful in real life. And now let's put everything together into one natural answer. I use public transport fairly often, especially when I'm in a big city. I usually take buses for short journeys and trains for longer trips. I think public transport is convenient when it works well, but it can be frustrating when there are delays or it gets too crowded. I like the fact that it saves me the stress of driving. Overall, I think good public transport makes daily life much easier.
That sounds clear, natural, and very easy to use.
That's the idea. Now let's practice a little. Do you use public transport often?
Yes, or not really.
Do you use public transport often?
I usually use.
What kind of public transport do you use most?
I usually use.
What problems do you have sometimes?
Sometimes it's.
How do you ask if a bus goes somewhere?
Does this bus.
So, as you can see, talking about public transport in English is not about difficult grammar.
It's about simple, natural phrases that help you talk about habits, ask practical questions, describe problems, and give your opinion clearly.
That's the idea. And that's what makes your English sound more natural, more useful, and more real.
And if you enjoy lessons like this, don't forget to subscribe.
It really helps the channel grow and reach more people.
And it helps more learners practice real natural English.
So subscribe, keep learning, and we'll see you in the next lesson.
Bye.